Mr. Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 2.5 minutes. My amendment would prohibit federal Homeland Security funding from being diverted for Operation Lone Star, ensuring that federal Homeland Security appropriations are spent on federal operations like Border Patrol. Operation Lone Star, unfortunately, has been defined by corruption, incompetence, and cruelty. 2 years ago, the governor of my state of Texas launched Operation Lone Star, a destructive $4.5 billion political stunt that has led to a federal civil rights investigation, the tragic deaths of 8 National Guard service members, and a formal diplomatic complaint from our nation's and Texas's largest trading partner. Under the guise of border security, Governor Greg Abbott has embarked on an unprecedented campaign of government overreach, seizing private property, destroying livelihoods, and turning American border cities and towns into war zones, where helicopters buzz overhead and armed troopers pull over American citizens for looking too much like immigrants. At the beginning of the summer, Governor Abbott installed invisible razor wire in the middle of the Rio Grande and built a 1,000-foot string of floating death traps that are separated by serrated blades and secured to the riverbed with a net that is designed to catch and drown the families who reach it. During the August recess, I went down to Eagle Pass, Texas, to see the impact of Operation Lone Star for myself. Standing on the banks of the river, I could see scraps of clothing and shoes stuck in the razor wire mesh that Governor Abbott's troops have installed on the border. The wire isn't tall enough or strong enough to stop anyone who's desperate enough to cross, but it's sharp enough to leave them bloodied and broken. When families finally make it to the U.S. soil, Operation Lone Star troopers have been arresting the fathers and sons on trumped-up trespassing charges and locking them up for months at a time, some without the ability to reach their families, while busing their wives and children to cities that are thousands of miles away, and other states, including New York, Colorado, California, and Illinois. Mr. Chair, Americans want border security. They also want an efficient and orderly immigration process. Operation Lone Star interferes with that. It hurts the federal government's effort, and it damages Border Patrol's efforts. When Democrats were in the majority, we voted for billions of dollars in funding for Customs and Border Protection and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and we fought to rebuild a functioning immigration system. I'll take 30 more seconds, Mr. Speaker. And we fought to rebuild a functioning immigration system from what had been left behind by the Trump administration. But Operation Lone Star isn't border security. It's just plain out brutality. There's a difference between treating people like human beings and treating them like animals. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I claim time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Texans have every right to defend and secure their borders, particularly during a time when the White House has abandoned attempts to secure the border and enforce our immigration laws. Because of the Biden administration's failed policy, states along the border, including Texas, are seeing their resources being severely depleted. They are overrun, so Governor Abbott did what most reasonable public servants would do and launched Operation Lone Star. The goal of Operation Lone Star is to stop cartels and criminals from smuggling deadly drugs and weapons and people into Texas. As of last week, the multi-agency effort resulted in 457,500 apprehensions and more than 34,400 criminal arrests, with more than 31,300 felonies reported. In the fight against fentanyl, Texas law enforcement has seized over 429 million lethal doses of fentanyl. Due to the rapid and dangerous migrant street releases in Texas, the governor has recently had to deploy additional buses to Eagle Pass and El Paso to assist those border communities overwhelmed by the influx of migrants. This is a constantly compounding issue that gets forgotten in the Beltway because it's out of sight and out of mind. This administration is putting politics over people and has completely abandoned these areas along our southwest border. If this was happening in my backyard, I want my state to step up too. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. And the gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield a minute and a half to my good friend from Texas, Greg Casar.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We must stop the dangerous, expensive, corrupt, and ineffective political stunts at the border and instead chart a new path for a safe, orderly, and humane immigration system. Abbott's Operation Lone Star must end, and I urge passage of my good friend Mr. Castro's amendment to ensure federal funding does not go to this failed program. Every day, Texas Governor Greg Abbott violates the rights of asylum seekers and violates the rights of our border communities, all to score political points against President Biden. We have seen these inhumane policies in action that have taken the lives of children at the border, and we have lost National Guardsmen to death. This is not only inhumane, but Operation Lone Star is not effective. Abbott is lighting $25 million on fire every week to cause suffering instead of creating solutions. Why do my colleagues across the aisle not want solutions? Because they have no interest in a functioning immigration system. They thrive off of keeping the immigration system broken so they can continue to stoke anti-immigrant fears for their own politics. Operation Lone Star, furthermore, is also unconstitutional. In Arizona versus the United States, the Supreme Court ruled the federal government, not people like Governor Abbott, have supremacy over the immigration system. Abbott's unconstitutional, abusive, wasteful, and inhumane Operation Lone Star is a disgrace to our state and to our nation. I want to be clear, not 1 cent of federal money should go towards caging families, cutting innocent people with razor wire, or drowning children, period.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Ohio is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to yield to my friend, the distinguished gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger, for as much time as he may consume.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what a opportunity to have Texans debating Texans. And I hope that every Texan from the RGV all the way to Amarillo, from El Paso all the way to Beaumont is listening to this debate, because the line is clear. Chaos, lawlessness, or law and order? Which is it going to be? And I do agree with my colleague who just said that the Constitution clearly says this is a federal issue. I think this is the first thing that we've agreed on. The Constitution does say that. Article 4, Section 4. Joe Biden has abdicated his responsibility. I've got the numbers from the Del Rio sector right here. Fiscal 23. This is just in Del Rio, 347,572 encounters, 144,900 known gotaways, 2,155 criminal arrests. And the gall to say that the governor of Texas doesn't have the right to protect us when the federal government has completely abdicated? I was in Eagle Pass this week. I wish that my colleagues would have been there. I wish they would have met the young lady from Venezuela who was brutally attacked by the cartel, separated from her husband, kicked in the face multiple times, 30 stitches in her head because of the failed policies. Texas is the only government that is doing anything about this. And yet the gall to say that we don't have the right to defend ourselves when a Venezuelan flag is placed onto the shore of Texas property? You know, in any other time period in history, that would be a declaration of war. Talk to the troopers. Talk to the state troopers who are down there and see the things that they're going through, the resuscitation of a 4-year-old last week and the week before. I've had multiple Border Patrol agents tell me that the reason we have 2.3 million people who've entered this country illegally this year is because we have no consequences. 2.2 million last year. Every year since Joe Biden has been president, this chaos has gotten worse and worse. Enough is enough. I'm so glad that we are sitting here having a Texas versus Texas debate, because I hope that Texans are looking at this for what it is. The reason that this is an issue is because the President of the United States, Secretary Mayorkas, and others throughout the administration on day one in January of 2021 reversed every single policy that worked. No more MPP, no more border wall, and to hear the falsehoods that are coming out of my colleagues about not funding Border Patrol agents, take a look at H.R. 2. Take a look at what that does to fund more agents, to put more technology into place. It's time for a shutdown of the southern border. And that's what we're calling on the president to do. This amendment should have said that we're going to reimburse the state of Texas for $5 billion this year and $5 billion last year. And I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized. The gentleman from Texas has the only time. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Cruelty, incompetence, these are what define Operation Lone Star. Unfortunately, the era that we're in American politics, for those across the aisle, is marked by fear-mongering because they have no solutions to the real issues that confront Americans: education, healthcare, jobs. Can't even get a budget together. So they try to scare everybody. They try to use these brown-skinned immigrants to scare everybody. That's what this is about. You're either going to send this money to Border Patrol, or you're going to send it to Greg Abbott so he can go on Fox News and be celebrated. I yield.
The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment.
Recorded vote.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. Ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas